So I really enjoyed that TED video on poverty. Some things I took away that really impacted me was how the United States, our health hasn't really increased as well as other countries. We're able to increase our economy very, very well, and our health is lacking.
Yeah. Something I thought about is that they didn't really take into consideration the other things having to do with our health. Like 100 years ago, everyone was born in barns. They weren't born in a hospital. You didn't have doctors and nurses and equipment everywhere. You just had like a wet nurse that knew how to deliver babies or something. But nowadays, whatever country you're in, pretty much you can go to a hospital. There's very few countries that still have to do it in their homes. And also, like 50 years ago, even they didn't even know how to do a cardiac surgery, whereas now they can do them on children like that. Like it's not even a big deal. And so that's really changed how the rest of the world has their I don't know their mortality rates have gotten better, whereas the United States has kind of just been on the forefront of that, and so they've been helping everyone else get up, so it's kind of I don't know evened out, I guess.
I thought it was really interesting how, specifically, the United States is more focused on the economy, the economic side of these statistics, whereas other countries like Singapore, they're more focused on the healthcare, and that's why their healthcare is higher. But the United States is obviously a powerhouse economically, and so we're just trying to play catch up on the health department.
I really liked how he said the seemingly impossible is possible, um, mostly because if you compare, like he did in the video, he compared the U.S. like 50 years ago to countries today, and we were where they were at one point, and I'm sure that the people back then in the U.S. didn't think that the U.S. would get so far today.
And I think that the way they lived back then was poverty, and they didn't think it was poverty. So, like, I feel like people who are living in poverty don't always know it is, or they're so far behind. The people who are ahead don't realize, like, yeah.
Well, when you look at time, 50 years ago, there were still people who had outhouses. Like, I doubt there's really anyone in the United States who uses an outhouse. Whereas in Africa, that's still really common. If they're lucky, they might have one, honestly. And so, like, it's really, like you said, like, when you're living in it, you don't think about it, especially when you're one of the core nations. Like, you don't think about how, oh my goodness, we have to do that. I mean, in 100 years from now, like, we're going to be able to have, like, I don't know, flying cars and all sorts of crazy stuff. And they're going to be like, oh, remember those roads? That was terrible. What poverty. And it's going to be very different. And I don't know, it's always like that.
Yeah.
And going off what you just said, here in the future, in about 50 years, maybe Africa will have caught up with how the United States is today, and so we'll look back and say, oh, they're in poverty, but when in reality, they're just how we were 50 years ago. And so maybe when we have our flying cars, they just have gotten to the road stage, and so it's always a progress, but they will always be in poverty in a sense.
So, what's the worst poverty you've ever seen?
Well, I served my mission in Mexico, and in several of my areas, I lived in huts, with cardboard roofs and things like that. And so, like, if the missionaries, which had like the nicest houses, had to live in that, like, there's people that had less, that they didn't have four walls, they didn't have a roof. Sometimes, like, there was this one family that it was 12 kids with just a mom, and they all lived like in pretty much a cardboard box that they just put some wood in, and they all just slept in that little box together. And I mean, I think that's like the biggest statement of real poverty when you don't even have a house. It's just cardboard.
Yeah, because you need those basic needs before you can get further in life, and before you even worry about an education, you need to have shelter, you need to have food and safety.
Stay alive.
Yeah.
The worst poverty I saw was on my mission in England. And in England, they have hundreds of refugees from all over in Africa as a part of the UN, and so they can go there. And coming from Africa, they're coming from those huts and everything. But they're not put in very nice places. They're all moldy, yucky, but they do have indoor plumbing, indoor heating, a kitchen, a stove, a refrigerator, and for me, that's still poverty. But for them, that was, you know, the Ritz. That was the nicest place they've ever had in their whole life.
Well, this video has definitely given us a lot of things to think about.